Huge amount of discussion around creativity in public relations at the moment. Julia touched on it again there with Cannes. Both from its importance and I guess actually what creativity means in public relations. And next up we've got Richard Millar and Simon Shaw from H&K Global's Centre of Creative Strategy. And they're going to be talking to us around the why agencies should become movements. Gents, over to you.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you all for sticking around. Friday afternoon, it's late. I'm Richard Millar. I'm the CEO of H&K in London. This is Simon Shaw. He's the Chief Creative Officer at H&K in London, and he's also my best friend. And interestingly, our bromance started about 5 years ago in the jury room at Cannes, when he and I were both jurors. And it took me 3.5 years to persuade him to join H&K, and he joined a little over 18 months ago. And in the 18 months since Simon joined, we've done pretty much everything together, except sleep together. Thank you, Tanya. What we want to use this half an hour for is to simply tell you the story of H&K London over the last 12 months. It is the largest office in the network. There are 300 consultants in Hill and Knowlton, London. And this is about our journey towards a creative movement.
So I'm going to start, if I may, with a little bit of a story, I guess. So I'm not from PR industry. I'm actually an architect. I studied architecture. Architecture, I don't know if you know, but in the UK is 2 degrees. So you do 3 years of a degree, then there's a split, and then you do another 2 years of a degree. So I did my first 3 years of my degree, and this is long before social media. And I did okay, got a job, and I was in my year out. I got it all planned. I was going back to university. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And I was away. I was very fortunately working abroad at the time. And I had some friends call me, because they didn't use Facebook then, it didn't exist. They called me and they said, you won't believe it, Sir Peter Cook is going to a place called the Bartlett. And you may not have heard of Sir Peter Cook, but Peter Cook is an absolutely amazingly iconic architect. Absolutely amazing. He, with a bunch of people, Ron Arad, Christine Hawley, created something called Archigram in the 60s and 70s. And Archigram was a movement. It was a group of architects coming together, making a statement about what architecture wasn't able to deliver in the UK. Peter came together to create this movement, and it became super famous. And of course, for me, Sir Peter Cook was this sort of hero. And Sir Peter Cook, for various different reasons, decided to go to a place called the Bartlett, which was at the time part of UCL, which is University College of London, and was a terrible, terrible architectural school. Terrible architectural school. But he was given the professorship of this school. And he put out the message, anybody that wants to do something different in architecture needs to come to this school. So I packed my bags, came back to the UK, ditched in my university I was with, and went to UCL and joined a huge queue of people waiting to work with Peter Cook at UCL. It was a great decision. And when we were thinking about, how we make a creative movement or culture change, those sorts of things kind of we were thinking about. And I guess we thought, why is it that actually creative movements form? And, over the last 2 days, we're pretty clear about what's going on in our industry. We kind of talk about it again and again and again. It's the same things we talk about over and over again. So we know what's changing. And if you look at creative movements, whether it's the Bauhaus, whether it's Archigram, whether it's constructivists, whether it's Google, they're all formed out of a moment of change. Bauhaus arguably was formed at the moment when actually industrialization hit, and they went, how do we apply creativity to industrialization? Google, you might say, was a similar disruption around technology. And we're at a moment of change in our industry. We're in a moment of change in the communications industry. And I'm not going to spend too long going through this, but one of the first things we did was map that change. And that change is causing disruption. So we looked at things like accelerating technology, which, we've talked about here today. We looked at truth and transparency, the notion that you have to be so authentic in your communications right now, because actually whatever you say, somebody's going to dig in and find out the truth about it. We looked at character and blurred audiences, the notion that I can be a dad, and I can also be a chief creative officer, and I can also be maybe a business owner. I can be many, many different things, and the way I consume content is completely changed. So we're a blurred audience now. It's very hard to identify the audience and think about when you might want to talk to them. And we looked at things like character. So we said, you know what? It's no longer good enough to have values. You now need to behave with character, which is a different thought around kind of brand behaviour. We looked at things like the power of the public and how the power of the public has sort of re-emerged, and often people talk about it instead of the mass of individuals. So the mass of individuals coming together creates a unique power of the public that never existed before. And we looked at exponentiality, so the notion that we're no longer living in a linear world where our businesses grow in a very simple linear way, but actually disruption's being caused by brands that are growing in an exponential way. I think Gartner says one of the top 5 brands in every sector will be displaced by a company started within the next 5 years. So it makes it hard to have a 5-year business plan if actually you don't know who your competitors are. So these are all really familiar themes that I guess we've touched upon in various different ways over the last day and a half. And then the final two are future legacy. So this notion of actually not necessarily purpose, but actually what is the future legacy you're leaving as a brand or a company. It's too easy, I think, and we saw it in some examples, to appropriate purpose, appropriate somebody else's purpose to your brand. Actually, what you need to be asking is, what is the future legacy that you, as a company, are going to be leaving in the world? And the final one on that list is which one? Which one?
You've done them.
I've done them all. So those are the 8 things that we kind of looked at. And then what we did is we overlaid on that what actually is changing culturally, because that's actually one of the, I guess one of the driving forces. And again, we've talked a lot about that today, especially around millennials. So what is driving kind of value? What are driving values? And I think, we can talk a lot, and there's so much research around the millennials, but actually, generally speaking, what's quite exciting is they're coming through with a different value set than perhaps we grew up with. So I guess our value set is very much based on financial return, money. They're going, what is our purpose? What are we actually delivering? What are we actually, why are we working for this company? So you overlay those two, and you come to quite an interesting space. So we wanted to show this video, really, which we think
I have a dream.
Really highlights the values of youth.
This nation will rise up.
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace.
The world is changing, and it's up to us to figure out which direction it is going.
Because it is people like you and people like me that are going to make the change today.
No human being should have to face the indignity and injustice of digging through the trash can to find their next meal.
Sanitation is a basic human right. A right each and every individual is entitled to.
Helping is a human act of compassion. The enemy is hunger, not the hungry.
In my country, clean water is a luxury.
Enquanto muitas pessoas desperdiçam água, poucas pessoas têm acesso à água limpa.
Tantangan terbesar kita adalah sifat apatis.
So now I leave it up to you to make that choice that you have. Don't let it slip through your fingers. A feeling doesn't feed a hungry person. We need to turn our feelings into action.
Today I am hopeful. Today I am Elijah King, and this is my dream.
So I guess you look at the power of stuff like that, great work from Unilever, and you combine that with a moment of change, and actually you go, fundamentally, we need to do something quite different. So we need to figure out how we attract the best talent, just in the same way as I guess I beat a path back to London to work with Peter Cook. How do we create that kind of desire and magnetism for talent? So we looked at what we believe defines a creative movement in order to see if there was a strategy that could come out of it for how we go about creating our own movement. And we looked at the definition of movement, a common ideology and an organised action. And we thought, how do we create a common ideology? How do we create organised action to create change within our agency, to allow us to adapt to changing values and the disruption we know is facing both our clients and our industry? Looking at the Bauhaus, it was a reaction against the florid and fussy styles of the 19th century. Or looking at Google, it's a mission born out of technological change to make information universally accessible. And we saw the commonalities between those two. And I think the commonalities are a common ideology, a common belief that everybody in that movement believes in. They're all created out of a moment of change or disruption. They all see a common enemy to react against, whether that's people not being able to access information or whether that's people not being able to use industrialism in the right way. And they're all super relevant for their time because they come out of the culture of their time. But most importantly, their unique beliefs create a culture that's magnetic for talent. So people are attracted to these kind of creative movements. You only have to look at the list of people who have come out of the Bauhaus: Walter Gropius, Marcel Breuer, Mies van der Rohe, some of the most famous designers in the world who all miraculously came together around that movement of that time. You only have to look at the stats that Deloitte put out recently around Google. Google is harder to get in. I've got colleagues here today. Google's harder to get in than Harvard. Look at us paying recruitment costs. I'm guessing if you get 2 million applications, you're probably not paying a recruitment consultant. So even in terms of, pure financials, it makes a huge amount of sense. So we thought, how do we start our own creative movement? How do we start that journey? And Richard.
So I'm just going to use the rest of this half hour to show you and tell you about some of the initiatives that we've put in place in the London office to deliver this level of creative movement. And it started with the question, well, who is our enemy? Simon mentioned one of the commonalities of creative movements is they focus against something. And we've heard over the course of the last 2 days many potential enemies being cited: procurement, the advertising agencies and others. But we came down to a very simple conclusion that we had one prime enemy, and it was ourselves. That it was the essence of who we were as a successful agency in London, that we were simply fat and lazy. We might have been happy, but life was very comfortable. And if you can't change that mindset, then you won't change the business. And it was a recognition, not just that we as an industry, we as an agency, and we as individuals were fat, happy, and lazy, but also that we wouldn't be the solution to the problem. We've changed the vocabulary to what can I do differently, as opposed to what can we do differently. And what we have talked about inside our agency for the last 12 months is a culture of empowerment that enables not me as the dad or Simon as the surrogate mum inside the agency to be the change, but effectively for everyone in the agency to effect the change before we are affected by change. And we've really focused ourselves around these 6 key drivers of the business. Understanding how we redefine value inside the agency and for our clients. Creating a set of beliefs and an organising purpose for the agency. It's no longer relevant simply to say we serve clients. We've got to have, if we're to appeal to the kids on that film that Simon just showed, we've got to have a clearer core purpose and a set of beliefs as an agency. We've got to collaborate better and celebrate the personal brand. It's all about me, as Kevin Bell said yesterday, not about H&K. We've got to learn to disrupt our own model before someone comes and disrupts it for us. And we've also got to identify the characteristics of that creative movement inside the agency. And finally, I've got to let go and empower the activists of change inside our agency to reach the tipping point where momentum carries the business on its own. So in terms of redefining value, we're attempting to move our agency from simply being something that sells a list of services to the one is clearly focused on output. Outputs that are not based only on time, but clearly on a return on objectives. And one of the key changes that we have made in terms of refocusing the agency around ideas rather than services is to take a much more ruthless and rigorous approach to creativity. We had this ludicrous saying inside H&K 12 months ago, which was, no idea is a bad idea, which probably meant that most of the ideas that left the agency were mediocre. So we put in place this ladder to measure the effectiveness of the ideas inside the agency. And that is not self-measuring the idea. The person who conceived it thinks, yeah, I think that's a 7, when in reality it's probably a 3. But using Simon and using the peer group to really test ideas. And as a consequence of that, we are selling bigger, braver, more courageous ideas to clients. And we're also developing products that we make money on whilst we sleep, which is something that I'm sure we would all like to do. Here is just one of those new products that we've launched in the last 12 months, which Richard referred to in his presentation this morning. We call it Sherlock. If you would like to come and work for us, or if you would like to come and work with us, we'll tell you more about it. We've also created a set of beliefs around an organising purpose. What do we stand for? Not only what does the client stand for, but what do we stand for? I came into this industry 30 years ago because I felt that I had an opportunity to get involved in change. The clients I could work for were the clients that were changing the world. We also need to attract talent inside H&K who believe that H&K is part of that change, not simply telling the story of change. Why are we in business and what do we believe? And only by articulating that can we, as an agency and as an industry, attract the right talent for the future. We've just got a short film here which shows how GE are using their purpose to attract better talent.
So what's your news?
I got a job. I'll be programming at GE.
Oh, I got a job too.
Zazzies.
The app where you put fruit hats on animals? I love that.
Guys, I'll be writing code that helps machines communicate.
I just zazzied you.
Look at it. Oh!
I can do dogs, hamsters, guinea pigs, you name it.
I'm gonna transform the way the world works.
I programmed that hat, and I can do cassava melons.
I'll be helping turbines power cities.
I put a turbine on a cat.
I can make hospitals run more efficiently.
This isn't a competition. Oh my gosh, I love it!
That's cute.
Can we say fruit platter on a whole litter of cats?
If we're to attract the guy in the blue jumper, then we've got to have a much clearer core purpose as an industry and as agencies. Plan for collaboration and celebrate the personal brand. The key point here is we empowered, as Kevin Bell explained yesterday, we empowered our colleagues inside the office to decide what technology platforms and solutions would enable them to do a better job. The consequence of that is that we are now organising our agency around this platform. And I think by Christmas, email will be dead inside H&K London. This has become a much, much more collaborative platform for the sharing of ideas and best practice. And we will also soon have clients working with their teams on this platform. And I encourage everyone who may not know Slack to take a look at that. And for a relatively old git like me, even I can understand how to use it effectively. 4, disrupt your own model. We've talked a lot over the course of the last 2 days about building partnerships to make us more relevant to our clients' businesses. What we have done is taken one of those partnerships and brought it inside the business to disrupt our own business. We have worked with Hyper Island, who work with the likes of Google and Apple, to bring their brains inside our office and disrupt the things that we're doing. Because if the enemy of our business is complacency, laziness, and a general sense of happiness, it's very easy to revert back to type. So we have partners from Hyper Island inside our business constantly trying to undermine our business, because if we don't disrupt our own business, someone somewhere else is going to come around the corner and disrupt it for us. And we've also identified, and we do celebrate the characteristics of the activists inside our business, and we have identified these 5 characteristics for what will make the H&K of the future fit for purpose and relevant. I'm not going to take you through all of these. Candace, our colleague who presented yesterday morning, shows all the characteristics of an idea catcher. Someone who is constantly tuned outside the 4 walls of our office, albeit a beautiful office in Clerkenwell Green, to understand what is going on creatively in the world and can catch those ideas, bring them into the agency, feed her colleagues, but ultimately add value to the client community. And then empowering activists to reach a tipping point. Perhaps not surprisingly, and perhaps I'd rather you didn't say this outside this room, there is a fair degree of bureaucracy working for WPP. Trying to rid ourselves of that bureaucracy, particularly for everyone but me, has been one of the primary goals of this process. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the principles of holacracy, but it's at the other end of the bureaucratic spectrum. I'm sure that we will not get H&K London to live the purity of the holacratic movement, but there are certain principles within that thought process around how organisations are managed and how organisations are run that we're trying to apply to our business right now. Moving from static job descriptions. We've talked about change inside our business for years and years and years. But a year ago, we took a look at all the job descriptions, and they were exactly the same job descriptions that I came into the agency nearly 20 years ago. It didn't reflect that we live in a much more dynamic environment, and that actually our roles are constantly changing inside the agency on a daily basis in response to the briefs that our clients give us and the challenges that the agency is facing. It's about distributing authority, not delegating authority. Showing your colleagues the problem the business faces and then empowering them to go and find the solution. Not saying, here's the solution, will you now go and execute it for me? And forgetting about large-scale reorganizations, but thinking about changing the business every week. Rapid iteration. And moving to a much clearer culture of transparency inside the business. This is where we think we've got to on our journey, 1 year in. Perhaps in some areas further than I thought we would get. In other areas, because we're impatient and we would like to see change faster, we'll be amplifying certain elements of this plan as we move into year 2. But whilst we have called this presentation towards a creative movement, the simple message that sits behind Simon and my presentation is that we believe that culture trumps business strategy. And I'll leave you with a quote from the boxer Mike Tyson, who said, "It's all very well having a plan until you're punched in the mouth." And the reality is that we are constantly being punched in the mouth. And for all the business plans we might write, it's the culture of the agency that we're building that will enable us to react faster and more progressively to the punches we take in the mouth from whoever you think our enemy is. Thank you very much.
Okay, I really enjoyed that. Any questions for the guys? There we go. I thought there'd be a few. Here we go.
Hi, it's everything very interesting. I wanted to know how difficult it was to get your team into this change and how they reacted.
It's taken us a year to create what I would say are probably an activist group that make up about 30% of the agency. This is not about 300 people yet who are empowered and driving the change. Identifying, and they were largely self-selected, that first 30% took us probably 3 to 4 months. And now it's about empowering that group to change the next group. But it's not easy. And I have to sit on my hands a lot of the time to stop interfering.
Question at the front.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this is happening only in London or across Europe or across all Julian Alton offices?
The agenda has been to use London because it's the largest office in the network, to be the pilot, to refine, identify best practice, and then start to iterate it around the network. Simon and I, before we landed here yesterday morning, spent a couple of days in Rome with our colleagues and a couple of days in Milan with our colleagues, taking them through this practice. So we will start to evangelize that process.
There is a minimum dimension for doing this?
We are trying to change London as an office. We are certainly seeing the commercial impact of that in terms of a faster rate of growth, top and bottom line, than the rest of our network. And as you know, that'll be the driver, ultimately, of adoption.
I think one of the things we have seen is that there is definitely, the movement is taking a life of its own now, which it didn't have for a while. And I think we're seeing things like the adoption of Slack. That's not top-down, that's the teams adopting that. And then we're seeing that spread across the network by itself. So that in itself is a part of culture change, I guess.
There's quite a few questions, so I'm going to keep going. Question at the back, Renee.
So I really applaud your efforts. I know how hard it is to do what you're trying to do right now, and it looks really, really terrific, like, with a lot of promise. And the gentleman in the front asked my question about how it works across the other offices, because I would imagine if you're doing really well in London, then how do you get your colleagues when you're looking to do a pitch or to partner on a client? How do you get them to uptake? So I was wondering, is there a plan for you all in your UK office as well as around the world to reward people with your performance management? Because wouldn't you need to do that to make sure that you have the people on board? Because that to me would be like the icing on the cake, if you could actually reward people on this so that the folks that don't believe can self-select themselves out of there.
Yeah, I think very much one of the rewards that we put in place in this early phase was the excitement of working with another organisation like Hyper Island. So a degree of self-selection was driven by that partnership that we brought into the agency, because the very simple message that we're going to be working with the guys who lead Apple suddenly awakens in the millennials this huge sense of that's going to give me an opportunity to learn something which I never thought I'd get inside H&K. So there are lots of different reward systems. Ultimately, I'm being very honest, this agenda is to try and get us away from simply being a financially rewarded organisation.
No, and I understand that, but I guess I meant more like when you do people's annual reviews, if they're not on board with the mindset and adhering to some of these, practical ways of working, then it's hard to keep enforcing it. But I completely get the financial reward.
Then they will leave.
Question in the front. Yep.
Yes, does this move implies a radical change of structures? I mean, the organization, the account management, the career path?
I don't think it's necessarily radical. I think it creates a much more dynamic and fluid organization that moves around problems or moves around clients rather than simply sits in the very hierarchical structure of yesterday.
There's a lady here with a question. Is that right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Hi. So what is your purpose, then?
I'm not going to reveal that in this room because you're my competition.
Well, you're going to reveal it somewhere. You might as well tell us. No, seriously, because I'm just on your website now. And by the way, it
is not on our website.
It's not mobile optimised, so I can't read half the text. By the way, Helen Olsen.
I thought you were our friend.
No, I am. I'm telling you this. Blah, 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 ideas and strategy, content creation. So, it's all the sort of stuff that obviously, we say, everyone says. So you have some inner wonderful driving purpose that is more motivating than that.
We've come to this conference to share what we are doing inside our business. Yeah? A lot of what I've told you and we have told you is not yet out in the market. Okay?
Okay.
Secrets.
Any more questions? Okay, guys, thank you so much. It was really interesting.